Conversations across time. 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 Conversations across time.
Good evening. Welcome to Conversations Across Time. My name is Vivian Crawford, and my co-host is former Pennsylvania State Representative Babette Josephs. Welcome, Babette.
Thank you.
Conversations Across Time is a television show that invites you, the viewer, to suppose what possible conversations could happen between important historical figures from differing time periods. The goal of Conversations Across Time is to introduce you, our audience, to the thought processes and strategic applications of immortals who are here this evening to discuss policies and issues which are relevant today. Tonight's guests are, seated next to Babette, is First Lady and mother of a president, Abigail Adams. Thank you so much for being here tonight. I look forward to an exciting conversation with you.
Thank you.
Seated next to First Lady Adams is King Henry II. Thank you, King Henry, for being here. There's a lot we have to talk about that truly I didn't know about you. I'm so interested in so many things that you've done. And seated next to King Henry is someone who is an immortal, someone who I revere, someone who has done a lot for so many people in this country, and his gift continues to give, and that is Justice Thurgood Marshall. Thank you, Justice Marshall.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
This is an interesting panel that's assembled because at first blush, most people would not recognize how much you have in common. Now, First Lady Adams is sitting next to Babette, and those of you that watch our show know that Babette is our resident feminist, our resident radical.
You do pretty good.
I try, but I can't compare to you, Babette. And so, First Lady Adams, one of the things that's particularly interesting to us is we want some background on you. One of the things that I found out about you was, when the president, and before he was the president, your husband was away attending to business. He was a very well-known lawyer. And unlike the women of your period, you were an educated woman. You homeschooled your children, but not only that, you had opinions and ideas. And you managed to run the farm while your husband was away. Can you tell us what that looked like at the time that you were engaged in doing that?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for asking me. I was an advocate for women's rights before the feminist bared her bra. I could have bared my corset. And when
burned it.
Yes, that's true. I could have burned it. Yes,
big
thank
fire.
you. Yes,
They were big.
Anyway, it was quite difficult when John was away for long periods of time on, on his diplomatic missions. It was a hardship to me because I had to take care of the family farm. I had to feed the cows. I had to make sure that they had food. I was hiring day laborers. I was hiring tenant farmers. I bought land for John and myself. I mended fences. I went out, I made investments, and very good investments, by the way.
And what is interesting about that is that you were a feminist long before there was a term, feminist. I was shocked to know that you agitated your husband to make certain that he remembered the ladies in the writing of the Declaration of Independence. So here you are managing a farm, which is, I guess, totally unlike any of the women in your any farms that were close to you. Those women probably looked at you and thought you were somewhat strange.
Oh, absolutely. But when I was managing the farm, I mean, it was such a hardship to me that I need to tell you about. It was so horrendous because in the meantime, John is whining over here in Philadelphia. He wants me to send him furniture. And I have to take care of the chickens over here. And I'm trying to figure out
And
what am I going to do.
How many children did you have? How many children did you have while you were doing that?
Oh, chickens. I had like 30 chickens I
How
had
many
to
children?
take.
But how many children
Children,
did you have?
4 children. I raised 4 children.
While you were managing the farm?
Yes.
You were the daughter of a minister. So you were educated yourself.
Yes, I was homeschooling my children because I wanted my daughter, Nabby, to have an education in the classics. And at the time, and more or less like the royalty in Europe. In fact, King Henry, your sons and daughters, they were tutored, I'm sure. So now what happened was these schools in New England, they were the dames schools. And they were only teaching reading, writing, and arithmetic. So I was extremely unhappy about it. So we had the advantage of, I homeschooled her. She had the same education as my sons. Now, we also had the advantage of my father's very extensive library, and we learned all about philosophy, psychology, poetry. We learned English, and we learned about everything. We learned everything is what we did.
And the kind of education that you were able to give your children at home, they would not have gotten had they gone to the local school.
Absolutely not.
That's what all homeschoolers
They would have
say.
they would have never received it. In fact, I was ahead of my time. I was Hillary before Hillary. I mean, I believed in advocating women. My child was extremely well educated. My children, I was extremely proud of them.
So now I want to jump in here for a moment because there is something that is interesting, and I believe Justice Marshall may, I don't know, I don't want to presuppose, but I would think because one of the classic things that we know about you, Justice Marshall, is that obviously your first Supreme Court argument had to do with the education of a young man who wanted to go to the University of Maryland Law School.
Indeed, it was a case that was close to my heart, you could say. The young man was denied access simply because of his race, which was something that was familiar both to me and to my mentors. This case was a case where the man had gone to, Murray was his name, went to Amherst, and well, we saw that justice was done by using the very structures that actually kept him out. And some of the things that Abigail has done speaks to that kind of principle.
Now, in researching you, First Lady Adams, I was surprised to find that not only did you homeschool your children, but you actually homeschooled a young Negro boy.
Yes, in fact, this young free black youth came to my home, and thank you for mentioning it, and he wanted me to teach him how to read and write, and I said I certainly will, and I enrolled him in a local night school for an apprentices. This nosy neighbor, he came to me and he said, "Get James out of school because the white children will not attend." And I said, "Who are you to deny James access to the school? Who are you not allowing him to have an education because of his skin color?"
At the time, there was no such thing as an abolitionist. During your life period, you lived from 1744 to 1818. So the abolitionist movement didn't start till after your death, years after your death. So the fact that you were indeed advocating for a minority child is something to be said, which is why I thought that, and again, here at Conversations Across Time, we try to bring people together that no one would suspect, because who would know that a First Lady of the United States and the mother of, in addition to being First Lady, also mother of a president, was so involved in something that Justice Marshall was fighting for years later.
The interesting thing about Abigail's approach is that I find that she was present with her issues. She continued to be a presence for feminist issues, even though those issues didn't really have an audience from the South in the conversation concerning the Constitution. But I find that the principle of keeping an issue present and alive is something that one must do this in order to see it all the way through. The thing that happened in the Murray case was, oddly enough, it was a sense of victory for me, but it was also set a precedent that we could use the processes that are set forward to ensure that they are correctly applied to all people.
Now, keeping that in mind, King Henry. I mean, you know, we did have your wife, Queen Eleanor of Aquitaine here, a very spirited lady.
A wench.
Abigail.
But she had some very strong thoughts and certain amount of admiration that we had for her for some of the things that she did. However, I was not aware, and I should as an attorney, and bet you and I are here and with Justice Marshall, was not aware of just how involved you were and how your reforms of the court system live to this day. Separation of church and state, that came from you. That was your idea.
Well, yes, I had a dispute with my dear friend who I loved, Thomas Becket. And Thomas Becket...
Now, we should say, Thomas Becket was your chancellor.
He became chancellor.
He was your friend, your boyhood friend.
We whored together, we wenched together, we drank together, and I made him, even though we had to go through the council, I made him Archbishop of Canterbury.
Do you regret that?
I regret it to this day. In fact, I had him killed. 4 of my knights killed Becket because Thomas Becket betrayed me. I loved him, he didn't love me back. And
how did he betray you? I mean, let's talk. I mean, because our audience doesn't know this. Let's give them some background on how he betrayed you.
Well,
Please do so.
The conflict occurred over who would try the clerics, whether the church had the power to try the clerics, or whether the King's Court or the governmental courts could try the clerics.
Sounds like you're talking about modern times.
Yes.
Doesn't it?
It does.
Yes.
It does, absolutely.
We're still fighting that fight.
Absolutely. But I thought, I made Thomas Archbishop of Canterbury primarily because I knew he would go along with me. But he stabbed me in the back, and he insisted that the church had the power to try the clerics. Now, there's more to this because the fines, if we took land away from the clerics and it were in the King's Courts, we would get the land, and if it were in the church courts, the church would get the land, so there was a little bit of economic things there. But Thomas betrayed me, and I set up, after I won the battle, even though I had to pay penance and Thomas became a saint, I set up a series of King's Courts that even your system of courts today are modeled after. The circuit courts,
Yes.
riding the circuit, civil courts, and not having religious issues tried in religious courts are all things that come from my administration.
And we're still fighting, as I said.
And yes, and I still believe, even though part of my anger at Thomas was that I felt he betrayed me. However, I still felt strongly that the King's Court should be supreme over the church court.
Now I have to just throw this out because this is conversations across time, and as one of our crew members like to say, this is controversy across time, because you know that historically there has always been the rumor that you and Thomas Becket were lovers. I'm just saying. And then by the same token, there is a rumor that Thomas Becket was your wife's lover. So I would not be true to what this show is about if I didn't bring it up.
Well, Miss Crawford, if he betrayed me as his lover, he deserved to die. And if he betrayed me by being my wife's lover, he deserved to die.
Oh, I love it.
And if he didn't back me up in terms of what I expected to do regarding the clerical courts versus the King's Courts, he deserved to die. And even though he became a martyr and I had to take a beating because of that, I don't regret having my nights.
You were alive,
through him.
and he was not. In the end, that's what counts. Huh?
You know, John and I thought that our son Charles was a homosexual. And we were very concerned about it. He was in the 20s, and he was involved with a 40-year-old man. Now, they lived together, and when Baron von Steuben, his lover, left, he departed. Charles almost had a nervous breakdown. So John and I assumed something was matter here. And there was a rift between John and Charles. In fact, John cut off all correspondence with Charles. He wouldn't speak to him after that. And he called him a he called him a beast. And when Charles died at 30 years of age, he refused, this is my husband, to bury my son in the family plot.
Justice Marshall, I wanted to ask you to just jump in here because you're known historically for your views on treatment of the oppressed and the civil rights of all people. And I just wondered if you could address that. And certainly, it seems to me that the First Lady still hurts, that this is something that still pains her.
Well, where I'm not personally familiar with the specifics concerning that kind of issue, the oppressed most certainly were close to my heart, as I considered myself to be among them. The nature of fighting for rights is that one must have a context within which to do this. And this is among the reasons why I find King Henry so essential in our historic context. Where his motives may have been connected to some of the financial gain and maybe some personal conflicts with his former friend, the systems that he came up with created a context for the solution of problems. And so those who are oppressed have a natural resource in the system to be able to manipulate that system so that it serves them correctly.
So do you think that's still true today?
I think that it has never not been true and will no doubt be true until eternity. There are those who were militant and thought that they might have solutions to problems that were outside of the system. It seems to me that change that is going to be indelible must be achieved within the set of rules of the system. Therefore, there's a check and a balance. So I can both empathize with Lady Abigail's condition, and also I'm very excited to be able to personally meet the king, who is responsible for really the framework that allowed us to do the work that we were doing to free and to help those who are disenfranchised because of their race.
So would you agree that the courts are the most accessible way for ordinary people to solve their problems as against the legislature, the king, the executive, other branches of government?
I would say that acumen in all areas and representation in all areas is most effective. But certainly the courts are the last, have the last say. And I believe that from a moral perspective, it is
in this system anyway,
within the court's purview to ensure that the morals of democracy are in fact represented by the policies that are set by some of those legislative fellows.
Are you at all surprised by the amount of actually, I believe that the movement for gender equality has followed the pathway of the civil rights movement to assure that people of color were treated as citizens. I mean, are you surprised, or did you see that from your position as a Supreme Court jurist? Did you see that coming? Did you recognize that would happen?
Well, it seemed to me to be an eventuality. Most certainly there are different classifications of those who are oppressed and many different reasons for particular communities not to be able to gain access. I believe that the principles concerning civil rights apply to all people equally. This has been the foundation of all of my thinking and all of my work. So that most certainly it was simply a matter of time before this community or the communities of different colors would embrace these. We've done work concerning matters of immigration long before in history, and so today these same issues loom, that and search and seizure and all of these things that apply to different groups of people in different ways. But what we have found is that there will always be those who are disenfranchised, so that the systems must be used to protect those interests.
Well, of course, the feminist movement came out of the civil rights movement because women felt, here I am helping to right the wrongs against a racial minority, and I'm being treated terribly.
I think it is safe to say that the freedom movements across the globe have found their roots in the civil rights movement. Principles that were set forth in that time and the tactics that we use to organize and to focus ourselves on the roots of the problems and not simply reacting to the problems themselves. I think this set a blueprint for those who are seeking freedom across the planet.
Be all persons.
Yes, yes. In fact, when John and I, we were sitting around the table and we were looking over the Declaration of Independence, and it said, all men are created equal. And I said to John, what is this? This isn't right. This is not right. It should be all people are created equal. And I said, if John had told Thomas Jefferson to do that, to change the wording in the Declaration of Independence to all people are created equal, women would not have had to wait for such a long time to be considered equal, and the Civil War might have been avoided, and because the issue of slavery might never have existed.
It may have made my job a little bit different.
Madam First Lady, though, don't you think your husband was involved in writing the Declaration of Independence? He became president. Don't you think you nagged him too much? You remind me of Queen Eleanor, who I was married to, kept giving me advice. Yeah, and kept nagging him and nagging him and nagging him. And maybe if you
in France, come on.
I know that's why I had her first marriage and what I married. I needed the land, but by the same token.
Wait, hold on. Confession.
But she nagged me to death. I mean, why were you nagging your husband so much?
But now, King Henry, you just admitted something.
They needed it.
Do you know what?
Guys needed it.
You needed her land. You married Eleanor because you needed her land.
And she could, I could spawn some sons.
And
yes.
What are you talking about? Nag, nag, nag. You ordered the rest of your wife Eleanor, and then you treated her like a prisoner for 15 years, and then you expected her to perform the duties that were required of her.
Not only did I treat her a prisoner, I put her in prison where she belonged.
And barbarian.
And John should have put you in prison.
Laid you low in dirt.
That's the other thing. She conspired with my sons to overthrow me.
I suppose you deserved it. I think she thought you deserved it.
But Justice Marshall, I think you did
Yes.
interject something. You did interject something just now. Please repeat.
Yes, you took away her power, King Henry.
I did say that clearly it is good to be the king.
It's good to be king.
Regardless of the circumstances.
It's not bad to be a justice of the Supreme Court either.
I imagine that has its advantages. But I think king is probably better.
Well, maybe
maybe
Anton Scalia surpasses me in terms of his power.
Clarence Thomas complains all the time about being a Supreme Court
justice. You said maybe Scalia. What did you
Clarence
say about Scalia?
has individual.
Maybe the current justice on the Supreme Court, Anton Scalia, surpasses me in terms of wielding power.
Oh, I thought you were going to say complaining about things.
Well, for those members of the audience who watch this show, you already know how Babette and I feel.
How we trashed Justice Scalia.
Justice Scalia.
At any chance we have.
At any chance, and of course, and I never miss an opportunity to refer to the jurist who replaced you, Justice Marshall. I never miss a chance to call him what I think he is, Uncle Thomas Clarence. Uncle Clarence Thomas. I'm sorry, but. I never miss that opportunity because guess what? I'm so disappointed for a jurist of your stature to have been replaced by this.
He complains. That's what he's good at. Oh, I'm a Supreme Court Justice. Oh, God, it hurts me. He's got the cushiest job in the world. Would you agree?
I think that I too mourn the death of some of my priorities that happened from the seat that I used to occupy. But I think that foremost in everyone's mind has to be the process of power, so that as we see results that we would like to have different, we must invest in solutions in the process that will give us these results. It is arguable that we get what we deserve in some
in this
instances.
society, in some way, I can't argue with that. We all do have the right to vote.
And you know
And
something?
if we choose not to,
That's right.
we deserve in some way. But the problem is those of us who vote get what the other people
So it is
deserve
about,
as well.
It is about voting, but it is also about being,
participating in any way.
participants in all pieces of the process.
Yes.
Voting is certainly a very important part of that, but to be prepared in our approach to our problems and to be clear about how the process allows for those kinds of solutions. These are intelligent approaches in the using mechanisms that are in fact available for that kind of use.
Well, what you're saying is what the lawyers say, I think, which is their procedure is everything.
Well, it is not everything, but it most certainly is the
Almost
entree to
everything. To my way of thinking, there are no ends, it's all means. And I sort of try and live that way as well, which is impossible.
And that being said, you know, I as I started out earlier, as I said earlier, King Henry, I have much appreciation for your efforts, albeit for another motive, of establishing what has led to the judiciary as we now have it. Your idea that there should be 12-man juries, that there should be a traveling judiciary, and that indeed, obviously it was for illiterate people, and we understand that the 12-man jury should consist of literate people. But that...
Men.
Yes, I'm sorry, literate men. Please forgive me. And
You know the word testimony
Yes.
comes from. You
Yes.
put your hand on your testicles, and since women couldn't do that, they couldn't be in a jury.
Well, not all women could do that.
Oh my, are we referring to anyone that we may know who may have been a guest?
But
You know-
anyway,
I happen to like the Bible the best.
right. The problem is that if I were around today, I would have the same problem with Justice Scalia as I had with Thomas Becket, because he keeps inserting
could have
religion into his
Have you got
decisions.
4 knights with you?
Yes, and that's what I was going to recommend to your president. He maybe would use the CIA instead of the 4
And get
knights.
rid of- yes. I mean, it sounds horrible for us to say that, but that would be
But
a
no,
way to-
because many of
But
Justice
it's not the
Scalia's
process.
It
decisions
would be a
are based
significant-
on
It's
religion.
not the process.
Yes.
What
It would
really
be a
counts is the
significant
process.
departure from civilized
Now
process.
here's you know, I knew that this was going to be an interesting conversation. I knew it was going to be spirited, and we are now at that time when we have to take our leave, and hopefully, if we could get this panel to come back next week, I believe that it would be enlightening, because there's so much we haven't even gotten to. We've got to talk about the NFL. But on behalf of Babette and myself and the entire Conversations Across Time crew, we want to thank our guests for being here tonight. We express our gratitude for their insights and for some of the revelations that we got. And we'd like you to come back next week and let's at least finish this conversation, because I can't wait to hear what you have to say about the NFL. So, with that being said, this has been Conversations Across Time. Please join us next week as we continue our conversation, as we take up our conversation with this exciting panel. Thanks and good night.
Conversations across time. 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 Conversations